I want to lay out some general guidelines for how we can all deal with the wounds in our life. First, if you've been wounded by mom or dad, you've got to choose to deal with this wound responsibly. The easy way is to deal with this wound irresponsibly, to bury the pain, complain, or play the victim. Regardless of mom or dad's role in the situation, the burden ultimately falls to you to resolve the situation in your own life. You must reject passivity and accept responsibility if there are unresolved issues which need to be dealt with. Otherwise, you'll never fully be the authentic man you were meant to be. Second, if you've been wounded by mom or dad, you should begin the process of forgiveness. You know, in the New Testament, Paul tells us that just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. Think about forgiveness like a pardon. You don't deny the pain. In fact, you acknowledge that you have paid the price for another person's poor choice. But you decide to no longer exact punishment from them in any form or fashion. It means that you are acknowledging the pain that they caused you, but you're choosing to let yourself and them move beyond it. This is not only offering grace to your parents, it's also medicine for your own soul. Nothing in the world is more freeing for any of us than to let go and forgive. Third, if you've been negatively impacted by mom or dad, share your story with some trustworthy men. Find some time to sit down with some safe men, a team you create for yourself, a team of men who love you and cheer for you and want God's best for your life. Tell them your story and how you were affected by your dad, or how you need to make a healthy break and put some boundaries up with your mom. Ask them to help you deal with this wound responsibly. In many cases, dealing with wounds is a process. It's not a one-time thing. And you need some teammates to help you navigate through that process. Fourth, if you're married and you've got some unresolved issues from your past, you need to tell your wife. Tell your wife that you recognize the problem and that you'll take the responsibility to correct it. If you'll do that, your wife will respect and admire you as a man. It also invites her into your journey as a man. Fifth, if there are unresolved issues with either parent, then you must deal with these issues, and this may mean having a direct but respectful conversation with mom or dad. Let's talk about what that conversation would look like specifically. Let's look at dad first. If you're a son wounded by dad, we are encouraging you and challenging you to consider seeking direct reconciliation with your father. If you feel a separation from your dad is probably not going to come to you. This is a chance for you to step into manhood. If you want reconciliation, you need to go to your dad. Even if you've been hurt deeply, you've got to be the one to initiate. If this is you, I want you to consider setting up a time when you can meet with your dad alone, or maybe with your siblings if they feel the same way, and I want you to sit down with him. Then just tell him the truth. Tell him how he has hurt you, and tell him, even more importantly, that you can forgive him. Now, you can't control his response. Response doesn't even matter. What matters is that you are stepping into authentic manhood by rejecting passivity and leading courageously. What if there are unresolved issues with mom? If this is you, you've got to create a strategy for making a clean break from mom and for creating a new normal in how you and her relate. You're going to need a plan. And in this plan, you need to identify the specific issues that you're dealing with. What specific areas need to be addressed between you and your mom? Is it her excessive time demand? Is she interfering with you and your wife, or you and your kids? Is it a side comment she makes about you or your wife's parenting style? Are you depending too much on mom's checkbook? Does she continue to dote over you like you're her little boy? Once you've identified the specific issues, then you need to create and enforce healthy boundaries. Sometimes you can implement these new boundaries without saying anything. But if needed, you must be willing to communicate your plan to mom respectfully and stand your ground, regardless of how she responds. And just because you set some boundaries doesn't mean you should abruptly cut off all communication with your mom. That's not what we're talking about. The key is having healthy boundaries, and you must decide what those boundaries are. Now, I want to say a few words to the dads in the room. First, if you're a dad, I want you to know that it's never too late to close the gap with your son. no matter how old he is. Sometimes older dads can wish that they would have known this stuff earlier. And now that their son is out of the house, it can feel like it's too late. You know, it's never too late. You can't change the past, but you can make changes right now. Maybe you do need to apologize. Maybe you need to tell your son where you messed up. Perhaps your son still needs to hear from you the 3 essentials. I love you, I'm proud of you, and you're good at something. Any son, no matter how old he is, will appreciate his dad's love, affirmation, and encouragement. Do you need to reconnect with your son? I want you to accept responsibility for that and begin to lead courageously. Get some quality time with your boy so that you can tell him if you failed in some areas and so that you can affirm him and bless him. Also, give him an opportunity to share too. Now, he may say some hard things, but it could be exactly what is needed in the relationship. Regardless of your son's response, you can begin to move forward in authentic manhood. Dads, here's another thing. Remember, every dad and every future dad needs to know this. Wounding your son to some degree is unavoidable. The fact is, all of us are flawed humans with strengths and weaknesses. And it's simply impossible for your son to not be affected by your weaknesses. So we don't need to try to act like we're perfect or have it all together or don't have any weaknesses. A better approach is to acknowledge our flaws both to ourselves and to our sons. Only then can we help ourselves and our sons move past them.
My stepfather, Mr. K, came into our family's life, and I was a little toddler kid, but I think my mom thought this would be good. You know, he seems to have his life together, and he seemed to like us kids, so she married him. But it turned out bad real quick, because one was an alcoholic, and he was abusive, mentally, physically, sexually, to both my mom and kids. And, you know, there was 4 of us in varying degrees of abuse, whether it was physical or we all went through the emotional torment. He dunked me in a tub one time, bent me over a tub of water, and he's dunking me, and he'd hold me there, and he'd say, hold your breath, and pull me up. And I would have to count to 25. Because that's when I know that's how long I could hold my breath. And he held me down one time against the oxygen deprivation, and I passed out. I woke up on the floor, looking up on that wet tile floor, to him breathing in my mouth. His first words were, boy, I'm the one that gives you life. You better never forget it. I was traveling, speaking, and I went through a little town I used to live in, and I really felt like God Almighty said, go find your stepfather. And I thought, oh man, Lord, it's been years, and I don't know how I'd feel around that man. And through a sister, I found his number, and she said, you know, Dad's sick. He's really sick, and I think you need to come down. I was there when the doctor came in. I looked at him and said, I'm very sorry to tell you, you have about 2 weeks to live. His insides are totally destroyed. All that hard drinking and doing them drugs and all the horrible lifestyle had caught him. And now he's dying. And then I felt God's Spirit wanting to show that man love through me, which it's beyond anything I can describe. And it's just almost was like the Bible says, I had to die to myself. Because, you know, part of me thought, well, you finally getting what you deserve. But yet God is saying, but I care for him. I died for him. And Lord, but look all the evil. Yeah, but you did evil too, Victor. It may not have been at the same extent, but you did wrong in your life, and I died for you. So, yeah. And the last night before I'd see him anymore, I was sleeping. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. I woke up, just clearly woke up, and this burden for this man's soul was so intense. I started praying, God, save him. God, save this man. I don't want him to go to hell. I don't want him to go to hell. And then I started weeping for him. And I couldn't believe it. I got on my knees on the side of that bed and was praying for this man. And I was shocked more than anybody else. My wife saw me and she was praying. I thought, man, I never seen anything like this. You know, and the next morning I went in early and he had a new nurse. And he did like this. He said, hey, nurse. He said, this is my son. He said, I'm proud of him. He's been worried about my eternity, but he don't have to worry no more. He said, I made it right with God last night. It was such a holy moment. I mean, I can't even explain it through words. I know the nurse kind of just like backed up, you know, to say, you could sense the presence of God so real. And then he turned and he looked at me and I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't know what to say or do. I looked right in his eyes and he looked at mine. I said, Dad, I love you. And for the first time ever in my life, he looked up at me. He said, boy, I love you too. And it felt good, I'm not gonna lie. It felt good to feel redemption between, you know, someone you thought was your dad as a kid and all the abuse. And that's the thing a lot of people don't understand. There's a connection where kids always want to connect with their parents no matter how bad they are. But I tell you what, that day, God set me free because I'd truly forgiven that man.